Alright, this is part 2 of the redo of the bathroom, and this is about putting down the flooring. But before I get into that, the other day I had to take a run down to Canandaigua, New York, and whenever I go down that way, I always stop at the Habitat for Humanity Restore and look around. And I've been looking for a light fixture for this bathroom redo, and I actually came across this one down there for $5, and I fell in love with it. Needed some modifications, but really I think it's a really nice fixture. It's actually all machined, polished stainless steel parts that are screwed together, and it's really precision made, and probably was worth a lot of money when it was new or whatever, but it's still in beautiful shape. And it was like a pendant that hung down a couple feet. So I just kind of took it all apart and, figured what parts I could use on it to shorten it down for my needs. And then just went back and put everything back together, ran the wires through it. And there you can see I wound up with a nice little fixture just for that room. And it's actually, really, it's a unique fixture. And it's just, I think it's a beautiful machine part. So, I'm happy with it. So I got it all together, and then I just had to take it back and go through and clean everything up good, and go polish up some of the surfaces and stuff on it. And it's it's really amazing. The thing actually weighs probably about 6-7 pounds. It's just all solid stainless. So I got that hung up, and I'm real happy with how that came out. And I put a smart bulb in there that's really a nightlight for my grandkids. And then I spent a couple hours trying to figure out how to position these tiles and where to put the seams and everything else. That's really an important part of before you start a job, figuring out where the seams and everything are going to be. And in the end, it turned out that I was just going to use that one straight wall to start off of. And now it was time to remove the toilet there before I get going. So I just kind of unhooked the pipes on that and unbolted it from the floor. And like I had shown installing this earlier in the year when we got it and replaced it. And we put one in each bathroom now, and they've been really wonderful units, no problems whatsoever, and we're happy with them. So I got some of the water out of it, got it all ready to pick off of there, and tried to drain every last drop out of it. And then I figured I'd better take that top off and get that out of the way before I break it, and just kind of pick it out of there. Now there's a time when it gets pretty smelly, and you got that little hole in the floor there, and it's got like the most god-awful smell coming out of it. It's hooked directly to the septic tank, so you want to do this as fast as you can, and make sure that you have something that's going to give you a good seal to plug it up, because you don't want that open while you're working. It's definitely disgusting. So I got the toilet out, and the little Harbor Freight dollies really come in handy too for like $5 there. They're good for everything. And then I was able to get behind where that toilet was and get that all sanded down and prepped and ready to just do the finished painting. And, I've seen some people where they paint around those toilets and stuff, and it just looks so just doesn't look right when the job's done. So I figure I'm gonna make sure everything's coated good there. And this paint does actually coat really nice with one coat of paint, so it only took a couple minutes, and it's basically dry in about an hour. So I got that all touched up, and while that's drying, I'm getting ready to do the flooring. And I did buy this kit off of Amazon, which I'll put a link to. They had one at Home Depot, but I didn't really like it, and I found this one. And I'm going to say that if you're going to do laminate flooring, make sure that you get a nice little rubber hammer there that's really clean and it won't mar anything. And you really do need that angle block for pulling them in. And these little spacers, actually, I found out they're kind of a waste. I'd rather use blocks of wood, but they do come in the kit, and they really don't cost much, so they'll always be good for something else. And they do kind of ratchet together, so you can use them to lock things in place. So I got the flooring. You can see these are 16 by 32 tiles that we have, and they tell you have to start with you have to look at the instructions, and it tells you to run that one side there against the wall when you're starting. And the instructions said you should be able to cut them with a utility knife. So I figure out what the heck, I'm going to try that first. Now you really want to make sure you carefully, figure out your layout and you carefully mark these tiles, because when you're dealing with big pieces like this, each of these tiles costs like, I think this is about $12 or $13 for the square footage in the tile. So you don't want to really make too many mistakes, and you don't want to have to, buy a lot of extras. So I got everything there all marked out, and I did wind up with the exact full tiles going the length of the room. So I was going to start with a half a tile, and that's what I'm just trying to cut here. Put a new blade on the knife there, figured that would help, and I ran over it a couple times, cutting as deep as I could. And then they said just push it down and it should snap off. Well, I pushed and there was absolutely no sign of that seam starting to open up, no matter how much I pushed or what I did. I tried doing it that way, and then I figured I'd put the metal edge underneath it. Maybe that would help it, and it turned out I could not cut these tiles. Maybe if they were a little bit thinner, these are probably close to 5/16 thick, I could have cut them. So I went down on the saw and I put on an old blade I had used for cutting plastic before, and that cut pretty good. I did get a little bit of a tear out on the joints, you could see, but I had to raise the blade up high like that just so that it wouldn't push the plastic flooring up. So in the end, I was able to cut them with the saw and get nice straight cuts. And then, all the time while I was doing this and before I started, I went over and I vacuumed the floor, and, I scraped it with a scraper to make sure there was nothing on it, because you really do need a perfectly flat floor. Anything that deviates from flat or has any, even a little speck of dirt or anything, is going to probably cause you problems with the tiles later. So you want to make sure that, everything is really clean, and then just kind of start locking them together. Now, this is my first time dealing with them, so I did fiddle a little bit with it, trying to get everything tight. And it said what you do is you just kind of run the first row, run them all together before you try to locate them. So I had to learn, it does take a little bit of pressure to get these together, and I'm sure that if it was warmer it might have made it easier too, because they do lock together really good, and there's like a wiper in there to keep water from being able to get through. So you do have to kind of tap everything, but the room's only about 65 degrees because it's the furthest point from the wood stove in the house. So the tiles aren't exactly hot and soft, but they did go together, and I tell you what, they did lock together beautiful once you got everything positioned, and there was no problem with the joints not fitting tight and not fitting square. And once you got them together, just take the hammer with that little block, and then I actually went back with the hammer itself to get it down flush. And once they were perfectly flush like that, they were really, you couldn't even see the seam. They actually pulled themselves together and sealed. So I'm really happy with the way they went together. So just kind of going down that first row to get going. And you can see I did, in the end, choose that wall. Originally I was going to start off the shower and cut all of these, but it caused many problems with the other joints. So I wound up going down this long wall, and then I'm going to backfill by the shower later. So I just kind of got all this first row locked together like they said. And then I went back to, I decided to start a second row to make sure everything would be nice and straight before I pushed it over and it wouldn't shift. So this is where, you have to kind of rock them a little bit and get them to lock together, and then tap them a little bit on the seams to seal them. But it's really worth taking the time now to make sure that the seams are pulled perfectly tight together, and everything is, you'll know, because once you tap them into place, if you can see any kind of a gap in them, just, continue on with the tools. And in the meantime, the house smells good. My wife just made some of these pecan shortbread cookies for me for putting the floor down for her, so I'll be enjoying them in a couple minutes. And then, here I am just kind of going through and getting that second tile going. And this is where you have to make sure that the edge is perfectly aligned to the previous tile right there, that seam, when you put them in. Just kind of rock them to get the other thing to seal, because there is a like a wiper in there that seals to make them waterproof, I think. And then I use that little tapping block. It's got like a lip on it. I did find out you have to be careful with it, because if it pops up, it will damage the tile, so you have to hold it down. But it really, it really did work good. And you could always use a block of wood too if you wanted to. But I think the most important thing is to have a rubber-faced little hammer like that had no marks or dents in it or anything, because you do use it a lot to get everything even. And that little angle bar there, really, I wouldn't want to do this without it. And, I do have big tiles here I'm dealing with. And here's what the stuff is. It's a waterproof, lifetime guaranteed laminate that came from Home Depot. So just take your time. You really want to make sure everything goes in there right, and that you don't nick or damage or do anything to any of the edges, because it does ruin a tile if you do that. It makes it so you can't use it in the center, at least. But first two rows, as you wiggle them together there, things shift a little bit, and it really starts pulling everything really perfect and straight. And all the seams, once they lock together, you've got a really nice tight joint on them all. And like I said, if it wasn't for color variations in the tiles, you wouldn't see the seams at all. So this is where it really does pay to take your time and make sure that you get them good and tight. Now, this did take a little longer than I had planned, because it's such a small room that it was like I got to do these couple rows here without cuts, and then all of a sudden everything became you had to start doing a lot of cutting, and I had to walk up and downstairs to cut them and stuff like that. So either the few solid ones, you could see they all kind of fall right into place. And you do have to make sure that when you do cut them, that there's absolutely no dust or anything in the any of the seams. You have to blow them out good, just because that will cause you problems with getting everything to butt perfectly tight together. And there it is. And I just use that little block and work good. They really tap down and pull everything together, and don't give up until you see the seam disappear, I found out. Because eventually it will. Something's, if there's a gap in there, there's something out somewhere on it. And these first two rows are really critical. And there you can see it. You tap it, that seam completely disappears. And then down at the corner at the end, I forgot to trim the door casings. So I took that little wobbling tool and was able to get that in there and clean them up so I could get the tiles under there, and then go back and finish up those two rows. And here you can see that second row there is all full tiles, and I wound up with exactly a 1/2 inch on each side, which really worked out good. No matter what you do, you have to make sure that you have a 1/4 inch gap all the way around. So just, it does take a little time, but as they start going down, it gets easier actually after the first two rows. Now, when you buy this type of flooring, you want to make sure that you buy enough to do the job. Plus, I threw in an extra a little bit over 10% just for in case I made a mistake or had a problem, which actually turned into 3 of these full tiles. So when you're dealing with these bigger size pieces, you really have to be careful. And another thing is, make sure you buy enough when you do it, because there's a lot number on each box, and you have to make sure all your boxes are matched. And there's one that I actually put in, and I damaged the edge because that block popped up. So here I'm replacing it now because I did put damage that little tongue down there. So it's now an end piece where I have to do a cut. So I just replaced that, and luckily I didn't destroy the tile. But make sure you buy enough to finish the entire job so the collar matches on it. And also, my wife bought this at the end of last summer for us, and recently we went back to Home Depot, and they no longer sell the exact same product. So, I'd hate to run out now or have a problem because there's no way you could finish it up. So there you can see how everything just kind of pulled right into place here. And now I've got the 2 rows done, and I'm going to try those orange spacers to set the 1/4 inch gap. And it turned out actually that this wall here was not exactly straight. There was a big bow in it where it goes right in the middle of it. So you can see some of those. It's between a 1/4 and 1/2 inch gap on there. But the end wall, they've got a 1/2 inch gap on there too. I just used wood blocks, and so basically those little spacers really were kind of useless. But they'll be good for something someday. And I just, wound up having to go down to my shop and cut these on the saw, which did a really good job. And I take the compressor and blow out the seams as I went along, just to make sure there was nothing going to stop them from sealing. This is kind of a long, boring video. I decided to show putting each tile down, and I did edit about an hour and a half out of it. So that's this is about as short as I could get it. I just figured someone that may be interested in putting this type of floor down, it might help, or someone else that may not interest at all. So basically, you can see when you're working in a small room, it's really you don't get a lot of full tiles to put down, but you do get a lot of cutting. And this stuff would be really easy to do in a larger room. And I have to say that I really do like the way it went down and the way it looks like it's going to seal and work. And it does come with a lifetime warranty, which I don't know what that means exactly. But, buying from Home Depot, I figured that they would honor it no matter what. So now I'm getting over by the toilet there. And part of location of how I put it down was based on that toilet seam location there also. So it's just a matter of taking your time and making sure everything fits tight as you go along. And it does get easier as you get further along. Now, another reason for the location of the the way I started was the location of the cuts here for this closet. If I had this seam here anywhere else, I could not make the cut. Well, I could have shifted a little bit, but I could not make the cut to get around the back side of that closet door there without a big gap and stuff. So, here I was able to just notch out the corner there and just lay the tile. I laid the tiles in place and took some measurements just to make sure that everything was going to be right. So I got that, that first one there all marked for the notch, and I figured I'd go down and just cut it on the bandsaw. And if you listen, I hit the button on the bandsaw to start it, one little click, and that was it. I looked around, there's no overload buttons, there's no reset buttons on anything, and I'm like, oh no, what's going on here? So finally I decided to look at the electronics and see if maybe there was an overload on the motor starter that had blown, which that does happen sometimes. So I pulled the panel off, and everything on this was really jammed in there. I couldn't believe it. And I looked at it, and it turned out once I got this off, you'll see in a second, there was no motor starter on this thing. They just used a contactor, and they actually use 220 volt control voltage throughout the whole unit. There's no overload protection on this thing, and they're running 220 down to the brake switches and stuff like that, which really I feel is a dangerous situation. And after I went through and I found a schematic on it online, and I went through and I debugged everything, and it turned out that the 220 volt coil on the contactor blew. I don't know why, and there you can see if I manually set the contactor, it works. But so this really is a very dangerous machine without having any overload protection or anything on it. I've never seen a 3 horsepower motor that was wired this cheaply with just a contactor. So it's another reason why I probably shouldn't have bought that Laguna bandsaw. It's really offshore junk. So then I got out the jigsaw, and I wound up figuring I'll cut them with the jigsaw. And I started with a fine cutting wood blade, and that gave me a little bit of tear out on the top. And finally I went to a down cut veneer blade, which has the teeth facing down. And that did a really wonderful job on cutting these with no more tear out or splintering or anything. So, that's a good thing to have if you're going to be cutting these. Look for a down cutting blade. And there you can see how nice, having that seam located there, I was able to split the difference right there, and be able to get around the back side of that also. So this one's another one, just kind of slipping in place here and locking in and pulling it tight. I was really lucky that they had used a real solid, firm type linoleum in this room previously, and I mean this stuff's like 25 years old, so it was shot. But if they had used the cushion style material, I would have had to tear it all out and taken it out before I even started this install. So you have to really look at the instructions as to what this stuff is rated to go over before you even purchase it, just to make sure it'll work in your situation. And I got back to the cutout for the bowl there, and I just kind of took my time and did it right on the floor there. I lined up the tiles, and I didn't want to really make any mistakes just because I only had a couple extras. Get that marked out, and then I found out the top of my patching compound bucket was the exact size for the circle that I needed, so that made it easy to draw the circle on there to cut around. And then back down to the shop with the jigsaw, and I just kind of drilled a little starting hole and was able to cut the circle out real easy there. And then you have to go back and blow off all that sawdust. Just make sure you don't have any of that whatsoever in the grooves. And then it was time to go up and install it. And this was one of those oh crap moments when I realized I had the tile backwards when I marked it. I had the wrong lip to the front. Oh well. Luckily I bought extra, and I could use that as a template because it was a perfect cut for the next one. I cut another tile out there, and that one fit perfect. I got it right this time. So one thing I learned is be very careful when you cut these things, especially when you're marking them and put them in place, because it does make a big difference when you're doing something like this. So luckily I had half the tile left that I can use in another location. And this is where that little metal bar for pulling the seams tight really makes a big difference. Now you could bend something up like this and make it yourself, or I think this kit was a worthwhile investment because it did work good for me. I'm happy with how everything worked. And as I said in the beginning, I did go back many times every time I did something and vacuum out the seams and stuff, just to make sure that there was nothing, no dust or anything under it that would cause a problem down the road. And this is just getting back into that area under the vanity there where I had piece that in, and this is where you can see I was really it was worth taking the time to get that all perfectly flush and level also, because the tiles do lay down nice and flat there. And as you put them down, just keep tapping until everything comes tight on them. And then that's the last piece here, and that went down nice. And now the new vanity, when I build it, I'm actually going to raise it up off the floor just so that it looks like the floor is bigger, and actually it's easier to clean under and stuff. And I think it'll make the room look much bigger. So pretty much that corner is all done now. And it's time to go back in the closet there and finish that up. So here's where the seam location made a big difference. I'm able to just notch that out to fit around there, and not have any pieces missing. Everything still comes in tight, and I can still install it without any major problems. Now I have these installed exactly 1/2 tile overlap like spacing, and they say you can install them with any overlap as long as it's over 8 inches between the end gaps like that. So I liked how they came out centered, but in the end when you're done you really can't see any of those any of the gaps anyway. You can see between the rows, you can see the color variation in the tiles a little bit. And that's it almost looks like a stone tile or something like that. But, basically, it looks like it's a one-piece floor when you're done. I got that corner done, and I, just kind of marked the center of it there, measured back, and cut that piece so I, still have the same centering on it. And that's the last piece out of the box, and you got to watch that little instructions always stuck on the bottom of that. And I will admit that this is my first time installing any kind of a laminate like this, and I am really impressed how nice it went down, and how nice it looks when it's done, and how easy it actually was in the end to put it all down. And even with this small room and cutting around things, it worked out good. Plus, I think having these really big sheets helped a lot too. But they do make for a lot more waste also, so it all depends. I'm kind of finishing up in the closet. And the next thing will be I'll be working on a vanity, and then probably do a video about making all the moldings and stuff to go back around the room. So it does, this is kind of a ongoing project that is going to take me a little while to get through. I just thought I'd share this just in case somebody's planning on installing this type of flooring. Might give them some ideas. Same thing, the other side of the cake door molding and casing, I forgot to cut that one too, so just kind of went back and took that little shaker tool and cleaned that out, got everything all cleaned out and vacuumed up, and all ready to go. And you always want to make sure that you've got a 1/4 inch gap, even the stuff that goes under the moldings like that and stuff. You want to have the gap on it. And if you do have a very large room, actually, I think they recommend that you put kind of like a strip in the center of it that can allows the tiles to expand and contract with temperature change. I forget exactly what it was, but I think they said once you get up around 100 foot, you have to put these special expansion strips in between it. So make sure you leave clearance to get everything in place when you cut the parts, and for expansion and contraction. And you can see you really can't do it without good. You can make a wooden tapping block, I guess, but I kind of like that softer one. It worked good for me. And that little tool there is really really pretty amazing. What how easy it makes to yank stuff in. This is basically the last full tile in the room. I'm down to now. Well, it's not really full. It was cut at the end, but the last larger tile in the room, and then it's going to be time to just go back and do a lot of the fill-ins. Now, I originally thought this would take me an hour or two to put the floor down, and actually with all the running up and down to cut things, and I spent an hour going through the bandsaw trying to get that thing working, and just time to get up and down and turn the camera on and off. It wound up taking me a good 6 hours to do this. So now it's time to cut the smaller pieces off the ends, and this is where you do waste a lot of tiles, so that's why the closer to the center you get everything, the less waste you'll have in the end. But I just wanted this smaller strip to be over here, so off center by a 1/2 of an inch that way on the room, just to make the seams line up where I want them. So again, the little strips on the end, they go in nice, and that little bent piece of steel there does a great job at pulling them together, and makes it really easy to get them in place. And there's actually some little bumpers underneath that too, so you don't damage the tiles. And go over them, good with the hammer. A little tap will bring them flush if there's any, anything that's up or down a little bit. So, it does take a couple taps to go over it and feel it with your fingers. You can feel if anything needs a little bit of tapping. And that's the last piece in the closet there going in. So I have to be careful because tapping has shifted the whole row a little bit. So there it is. You can see the seam basically disappears. So now I got the couple pieces to place down here behind the toilet there where that goes, and same thing. These little pieces actually go in nice and easy, and when you cut them, like I said before, make sure they're clean. And then the two pieces in front of the shower, which I decided to put there, they're a little bit different to get in because they're going kind of backwards of the way it locks together. So you want to make sure that you're careful when you get them, start the alignment on them, because you're pulling one under the other now. And, they did lock in nice and tight though in the end, and that little bar just pulled them together. But you have to be real careful when you're, first setting them in place, that you don't nick anything or damage anything. We got that one in, and then, this little last piece here. And, at this point, actually, I stopped for the day, and I cleaned up, and the next morning I decided to wait and just finish it up because my knees were getting kind of sore from all the kneeling and all the walking up and down. So I had to drill out for the mark the tiles, cut them to the width that for those couple last pieces, and I had to drill them to put the pipes through. And it turned out that a Forstner bit really does a good clean job on them. You can see, so that worked out good for me with no tear out or anything else, and it was easy to do in the drill press. That gave me some nice clean holes here. Now to get a good tight fit around the pipes and not have to notch them back to the wall like that, I basically decided that I was going to cut the existing valves off. Now, these are old multi-turn valves that you have to turn like, 8 times to get them to turn on or off. And they're you really have to crank them down to stop them from leaking. So I did pick up, I picked up one here that I was going to change out. And it's just I replaced it with a 1/4 inch compression type fitting valve. The first thing I did is I just took a little miniature tubing cutter that would fit in there and cut the old valve off because I didn't feel like starting up a torch and messing with that. And then I was able to just to slip that piece in place there and get that all locked in there nice and tight. So, and then that way I had a nice small hole there that I'm going to go back and put some silicone around later anyway to keep condensation from dripping down. But the one thing we did notice with these this 1.2 gallon toilet, here's a little tubing cleaner. I decided to clean the edge before I put the valve on there. Get a nice clean surface to clamp on, and it's a compression fitting, so that way it would make it so be easier you'd have less of a chance of having a leak. And then you just slip the ferrule on the nut, the ferrule, and then put it together and tighten it up. But we did notice what I was saying was with this 1.2 gallon toilet that we have a lot less condensation in the summertime. We have cold well water, and the old 2.5 gallon toilets used to drip condensation all summer long, and the floor would be soaked. We've seen none of that since switching over, so that was really a good thing for switching over. And I just snapped a little plastic chrome looking thing on there to cover it up for now. And it's time to replace the seal. Now I had cut the original bolts off and added 5/16 thickness for this flooring here, so I had to buy a kit that had an extra thick wax seal there and new bolts because the old ones were cut too short. So I got the new bolts slid in the flange, and that's a real easy job there. And then the wax ring, we actually just kind of pour it in this little plastic housing. So you just have to peel that back and release the actual ring itself, and try not to damage it while you're doing that. You can see there is a flange on this one too that supposed to help make it leak free, and this is the point where you really want to work fast. Once you remove that plug from that pipe, God knows what's coming out of that little pipe, but it sure doesn't smell good. So now I gonna rolling the toilet in place, and the little Harbor Freight dollies you get for like $5 are really handy to have around for stuff like this when you're working alone. And I just got a couple blocks to set it up on so I could make sure that the bolts and stuff were centered in the holes before I dropped it in place. And these toilets are definitely a lot heavier once they're all together trying to put them in place. It's not like putting the separate parts in when I originally did it. So I got everything lined up pretty good before I dropped it on the wax here, and then just kind of rocked it down off the 2x4. That way I didn't have to hold it up or have any help with it. And yank that out, and then put the washers in. There's a little plastic clip that holds the cap on, and then I had an extra washer, so I threw another washer on there and a lock bolt that they give you, and just snug them down just a little bit. Make sure you rock the toilet a little bit to make sure the seal is all settled and stuff. And then I went back with the angle grinder. I threw protection on the floor because any kind of burning would damage this floor. So I just threw some protection on the floor. And proceeded to use the grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut down that bolt flush with the nut. And at that point, the little plastic cap just pops right back on there. And you're done with that side. And then I just had to go back around the other side and do that. And now put the feed line back on. And that's got all rubber seals on it. So it's really, just get these things in there finger tight, basically. The one up on the top, you crank that down hand tight as you can get it. And that bottom one there, you just snug it up a little bit and turn on, check for leaks, and everything was good to go. And next it's time to go back and put that little sill threshold plate on, and I saved the one I pulled off. And luckily, when I originally installed these, I saved any of the extra little tabs that I had there, because you destroy them when you actually pry this thing up out of there. So all you have to do is put these little plastic tabs, and they've got like nibs that grab on a 1/4-inch hole in the floor. So they slide in a V-groove on the bottom like that. And once you get them in, you have to, I had previously drilled 5 holes, which was the required number for a door this size. So what I'm just trying to do is get these lined up with the existing holes that were in there already, and then you feed each of those little rubber nibs down into the hole, and that could take a little while to get everything lined up right. But basically, once you get them started, you just give it a little tap down, and it locks the trim in place, and everything's good. You can see everything just locks right down tight once you get them all lined up in place. So that's pretty much the last of it. And here you can see this is what I have left. I have 2 full tiles, and then I have all the cut-off pieces. And these actually are going to be used to line the bottom of the vanity. So, most of them should be used up. And I will say, you really want to, before you attack a job like this, you really want to get, at least some of these tools to be able to make the installation go easy and right. And these little spacers here, I don't know. I'm still on the shelf about them. But I'll put a link to what I actually purchased. And this is the flooring. And one thing I wanted to show you, there's a lot number on each of these. And when you do buy this flooring, you want to make sure you see the run number there. Make sure that all the cartons that you get are the same run number. Otherwise, you could have problems. So here it is, all done. Still need moldings and stuff like that, but I am really happy with the way it came out. And so far I'm happy with what I've done in the room here. I did move the whole house vacuum hose in this closet too. And you can see everything's starting to come back together. And the floor did. I really love it. It went down nice. It's a real nice material, and they say it's a lifetime guarantee, so we'll see how it stands up, but I really think it will. The only thing is it does make the room a little bit echoey now, so we have to get some rugs and things back on the wall there to quiet it down, but I still have that one piece to do. I have to pick up 2 more valves. I decided to shorten down those pipes and put new 1/4 turn valves on them also, so I have to get to Home Depot next. So if you're planning on, putting down any kind of flooring like this, hopefully this will give you some ideas for, your job and stuff, and just some ideas of, trying to space the seams and everything else. And I really do love that little light. It's just so unique. There's no way I would have been able to find that anywhere else but a Restore store. And here it is. I'm doing the pork in the Instant Pot tonight. We really love that thing, and we've done it several times, and we're trying to use up all the sauerkraut now. So there it is. It says worry-proof, life-proof flooring, and a good installation kit is really going to help you out. And I'm really happy with the outcome of this. And I can say there was the flooring was really a great product that was really well made and went down nice. And next I'll be starting on the vanity. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.